and welcome to this episode of GFA-Attract. GFA-Attract, as you know, is the program where we actually talk to venture capital investors, get to know a little bit about them, get to know about the reasons why they invest in companies, and hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of GFA-Attract. GFA-Attract, as you know, is the program where we actually talk to venture capital investors, get to know a little bit about them, get to know about the reasons why they invest in companies, and things that entrepreneurs actually need in order to grow. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Jonathan Berman. Jonathan is the Managing Director of Africa Innovation Partners, which invest in early stage technology companies focused on emerging markets. He served on the board or serves on the board of directors of Asoko Insights, an information services company, delivering superior data and analytics on African corporations to customers worldwide. And he also serves on the board of Invest Africa, the membership organization for investors in Africa. Jonathan is author of the book Success in Africa, which President Bill Clinton calls timely and important. The Coke CEO, Neville Isdell, described as a great book, and Mac Mobius describes as dynamite. His views appear in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Bloomberg, and the Harvard Business Review. Jonathan previously served as a partner and director of the global corporate practice at Dalberg, a mission-driven advisory firm focused on frontier markets with 20 offices worldwide. He has advised numerous global Fortune 500 companies on entry and operations in emerging and frontier markets of Asia and Africa. His clients include global leaders in oil and gas, mining, agribusiness, education, healthcare, IT, and consumer goods, as well as governments and investors active in these sectors. Jonathan holds a BA from Yale and an MA in political economy from UC Berkeley. He's a life member of the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations. Once again, join me in welcoming Jonathan Berman. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Debo. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to actually talk to us at GFA. Thanks again. Yeah. So, Jonathan, without much ado, we actually want to get to know a little bit about, you personally before we start going into the venture capital space. Who is Jonathan? Could you do an introduction to us?
Well, that was a good enough introduction for me. Far more than I deserve. Yeah. I think the only thing I would say beyond that is that I'm a proud and happy family man, and a big supporter and believer in Africa and entrepreneurship in Africa.
I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't ask how. I mean, you're currently in the U.S. I'm guessing you're
Yes.
American. And so, how did Africa come into the picture?
That's right. So I often sometimes wonder myself, how did this Jewish boy from the Bronx fall into African venture capital? Quite by accident, actually. So the first decade of my career was spent in emerging Asia, largely in Greater China, then in Southeast Asia, and finished up literally in Outer Mongolia. That was the last work I did there. And it was only because I had a client who was there who then initiated a large project in West Africa that I wound up in Africa. They asked me to come, and I said I know nothing about it, but they said yes, but we know you, and it's not really a request; it's kind of a command. So I came, and the first place I came into Africa was Equatorial Guinea.
Ah,
which is a tough, which at that time at least was a very tough spot, very hard spot to land. Uh,
yes.
we did good work, but it was really in my subsequent work where I began to work in Nigeria, and when I first landed in Lagos, that my eyes opened to to all that Africa could be. I probably had the same view of Africa as most Americans do when we started. You know, a land of happy animals and miserable people. That's how most Americans think about it. But when I came to Lagos, you know, there was this clear explosion of entrepreneurial spirit and drive and opportunity, and that really caught my attention. And then as I traveled more in the continent and spent time in Nairobi, and then increasingly in the software capital, so I spent time in Cape Town. And then you know, I've traveled in about 20 countries in the continent. I came to have a broad and optimistic view of what I was seeing there, and came to realize that that's where I wanted to make the balance of my career.
That sounds interesting. One thing I noticed from even the way you pronounce the cities. So, for example, you pronounce Lagos almost like a local. You said Lagos. That's unusual.
Well, aside from affinity for accents, I remember somebody once said, I don't know if this is still true, but it used to be that in Lagos, I haven't heard it in a while. They used to say to me, they used to not say welcome to Lagos. They'd say, this is Lagos. Which said all you need to know about Lagos. But coming from New York City, I felt that was great. I felt like that was right. You know, I feel right at home.
Actually, that's true. New York and Lagos, probably whoever's listening, and maybe if you work in government, make sure Lagos and New York become sister cities. Anyway.
Exactly. Yes, they are in spirit. They might as well be in fact.
Exactly. Anyways, thanks, Jonathan, for that introduction of yourself. So then your travels across Africa, landing in Equatorial Guinea, you visited Nigeria, you've gone to about 20 countries around the continent and all that. So how did you then become segue into venture capital?
Yes, this also was not where I started. My career really began actually as far away as you could get from that with large extractive companies, big mining, oil and gas. And the top five in mining and top five in gas were my clients for a long time. And I'm still close with people in that space. But you could not be kind of as far away from African technology as extractives are, and that I think is a pity. You know, I have said to the people at Mining in Dabo, which is the largest mining gathering in Africa, you know, there seems to be this Africa of mining in Daba and the Africa of M-Pesa, and the two never seem to meet, which is an awful shame because the technology that's developed in Africa and the technological talent could really be transformational of the natural resource sector. But that journey was one that followed the geography I described. So when I came to Nigeria, it actually was initially for the extractive sector, but I began to see all the, and now this is now 14 years ago, I was able to see a much broader range of activity. And when I wrote the book that you mentioned, Success in Africa, I had it had the benefit of allowing me to speak to leaders in all sectors. So while I was interviewing the CEOs who I knew of the largest sectors of the largest companies in the extractive sector, I also had the opportunity to talk to Mitchell Alegbe at InterSwitch, who is now my partner in AIP, and Ken Njoroge at Cellulant, which was then just a much smaller company, but I thought this is an interesting company, let's talk to them. And of all the sectors I touched on in that book, the one that clearly had the most opportunity for value creation, public value, private value, was the digital transformation of Africa. This was the biggest opportunity on the continent. And since I felt that the opportunity, I wanted to continue to work on the continent for at least the next decade, maybe two, and I was interested in the biggest opportunity there, this was clearly it. And I'm only, I probably made that decision 7 years ago, and I'm only more convinced of it now.
Sounds nice. You touched on the book, right? And it's very, when I read that about you, I thought that was very interesting because it seems like, and I say seems, like African stories aren't necessarily told out there. You know, you hinted in the very beginning that what everybody thinks of is, okay, happy animals everywhere and parks. Sorry, I say this because, for example, I'm personally, even though I don't live in Africa at the moment, I was born in Nigeria, and I remember that the first animal I saw was when I went to London. So the first time I saw a live animal wasn't in Nigeria, it was in London. And
Yeah, of
so
course.
it's very so the question then is, why isn't the African story resonating out there? What's the, from what you, being an author yourself, from what you've seen,
Yeah.
what is missing?
Yeah. So for, the short answer is, well, there is a story out there, and this is an important place to start. There is a prevailing narrative, right?
Yes.
Of you know, misery, corruption, you know, dictators, and Nelson Mandela as this outstanding exception, right? And people are, you know, people and industries are invested in that narrative. There are, and you know, there are people who have built their whole careers around that narrative and are loath to abandon it. And these people, you know, that's true in diplomacy, in, I would argue, in development, in film, and in media for sure. So you need a counter narrative, right? And that counter narrative that's strong. And counter narratives, or narratives in general, have two things that matter: stories and characters. This is you know, this is as true in nonfiction and real life and politics as it is in a fictional tale. You need a good story. You need a strong story and strong characters. And so that's actually what my primary purpose was in Success in Africa, was to actually provide a channel for some of the most impressive business leaders in Africa to tell that story, because I was seeing a story of enormous business success and also of enormously capable business executives. I mean, executives who are capable of managing uncertainty, for example, in Africa, that were running circles around their global counterparts on that front. And so being able to create a space where those kind of executives could speak, those kind of business leaders, and of course they speak of more than just business. I doubt I know a significant business leader in Africa who will not speak to the social challenges on the continent, and in a much more fluid way, by the way, than I think their Western counterparts do. So bringing those voices forward allows a different narrative to come forward. So, you know, that and success, right? Visible success.
Visible success.
Yeah.
Success. Excellent.
So that, let me just say, so that in the venture space, so actually in the venture space, I think they've got that down. I actually think that we have a number of in African in the African entrepreneurial community, and in particular the digital transformation community, there are a number of exceptionally powerful and polished rising leaders. They are really able to communicate well the opportunity on the continent. I think that, you know, that gets people's attention, and it has gotten people's attention. The turning point will have to, we are at the turning point where what counts is broad-based success and exits. So, you know, Mo Ibrahim's story is powerful, not just because Mo is a strong character but because the story is one of tremendous sort of epic success.
Yeah, that does bring me to a point where some people argue, or some people say, that typically the Africans who are well regarded, or maybe even the ones who even raise large series in terms of VC funds, are usually Africans who have actually left Africa, have maybe gone to the West, and then they raise capital and then come back and do those things. So it's pretty much the same person, but all he's actually done has been either to leave or to set up say maybe, you know, a foreign corporation in order to actually attract investment. What do you say to people who make that argument that that it's still the same person or still the same space, but that maybe venture capital investors probably need to look more in the African space?
Got you. Okay, so first, I'll challenge the assertion. I think that if you think about Mitchell Legbe, who was born, educated, and has had his whole career in Nigeria, and is probably currently the most successful software executive in Africa. Strive, right? Masiyiwa, who while more in telco, you know, built his entire career in Africa. Fatuma Naleko, who built MTN. Was educated, you know, received some of his education in the U.S., but has built his career in Africa. I think that I'm going to challenge the assertion that you don't see well-funded, you know, extremely successful venture, you know, digital executives in Africa. So first there's that. Having said that, I think we have seen an overweight of capital in founders that are what I'll call familiar founders, particularly international capital in familiar founders. And let's call it what it is. Initially, you know, I think we've seen it with white founders in Africa that are clearly overweight. With what I'll call returnee founders and founders of all kinds, who are maybe highly capable and highly skilled. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I think that, you know, they have they both understand the language and understand the processes and the visual cues of global capital, and particularly Western capital. They also, in many cases, have the qualifications that are indicators of trustworthiness or likelihood of success, or at least hard work. So, you know, if you have a Stanford degree and you've worked at McKinsey, you know, those are indicators that, in absence of other information, an investor will migrate to. Now, I know people from both those institutions who are fantastic, who have been partners of mine and whom I've invested with. But I also know people from both of those institutions and the ones I went to that are unready to be entrepreneurs or unworthy of my trust and my capital, right? So those are by no means a sure thing. What I think most venture capitalists lack is any ability to penetrate below that, and of course that's where opportunity lies then, right? Because if most capital cannot pierce that veil and get to, let's say, I'll call it a young Mitchell or a young Strive, right? A young, capable, hustling Nigerian or Ghanaian. With none of those markers, right? But with a great idea, great drive, and having taken it on the chin a few times, right? That's someone who you can really invest in at an early stage, get access to them when others aren't paying attention, and advance. And it seems to me that's part of GFA's great opportunity. And we see, you know, and we're always trying to do it we're at a later stage where people are more visible. But I think at all stages of venture in Africa, probably the greatest disequilibrium of capital and talent and opportunity. That's a great talent and opportunity with insufficient capital looking at it is amongst the population you just described.
Interesting.
And therefore, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, I mean, when you mentioned the familiar faces, that on the one hand, though, there's an expectation that the entrepreneur, typically the guy who has maybe gone to Stanford or has worked in McKinsey or KPMG, has or usually is more investor ready. Again, with clauses in there, but on the one hand is more investor ready, and on the other hand probably has an understanding of the local dynamics. Or I guess it's two questions in one. On the one hand, these familiar faces seem to me, would you say that the familiar faces actually represent a low-hanging fruit and an easier way to invest in the continent? And then the second question then becomes, does market research actually help in provide clarity and transparency in the industries in Africa?
Right. Okay. So let me answer the first question first, and then I'll ask you to ask the second question again. Are they the low-hanging fruit? No, they are. They can appear to be, right?
Okay.
I think it's a deception. I think it's a it's not deception because it's not. There's no intent. There's no deception on their part. I think that it is in absence of real understanding of the market, investors fall back on what they will call pattern recognition, right? And lots of VCs talk about, oh, I know this is a good company because I've got a sense of it from pattern recognition. Well, yeah, but the patterns you recognize are correct for Silicon Valley, maybe for the United States, maybe, but almost certainly incorrect patterns for what's going to work in Africa. And so there's really little reason to believe that the patterns that succeeded here would succeed there, or at the very least, one has to question what elements of that pattern need to be adjusted, right? But I would probably say not adjusted. That's not insufficient. That's insufficient. The pattern needs to be recreated and created anew from that environment. You have to look for the pattern that emerged from Africa if it's going to work in Africa. Now, we are believers that investable technologies in Africa are ones, investable companies are ones that have global potential, right? And so we have an eye for not just what will work in Africa, but what will work, what solves a problem that's broader. So it's not Africa as an island, right? But if Africa is your starting point, you better have that right. And the idea that you were going to impose on it a pattern that was right in Palo Alto is like not. It just seems to me unlikely.
Yeah.
That's that question. Can you repeat your second question?
The second question was, does market research actually provide clarity to venture capital investors?
Yes, I think I think it does. So first, even we work hard to get a sense of the landscape, particularly the competitive landscape, on each of the companies that we're looking at seriously, right? And so we don't always, I think we're always looking for more information on that and more up-to-date information on that. And then importantly, there's a paucity of data still on deal flow, not on deal flow, but on deals, deal sizes, valuations, and competitive analysis. I'd say those two are the areas where most sort of have appetite for research that isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm. So basically, in terms of research, one of the things venture capital firms would like to know is, as you mentioned, deals, sizes of the deals, valuations, and the general competitive landscape. Would that be a fair?
Yeah. And I think people, of those three, the one that's most hidden as a real need is competitive landscape. I think most people in the space have the idea that they know the competitive landscape fairly well. But the reality is, we've found that in cases where we felt we knew the competitive landscape and then did the research, we actually found it was much broader and included multiple incoming challengers that hadn't really been visible yet. like large companies that were moving in, that had noticed the growth of an entrepreneur, or were coming into the competitive space. You know, I just find we perpetually under our first sense of the landscape is universally insufficient.
One of the things you mentioned when we were talking earlier was about value creation on digital transformation in Africa, and that this is one of the things that attracted you to the continent.
Oh, yeah.
So where would you say the continent is right now, from your assessment, at least over the last, say, 10 years?
In terms of what?
In terms of how far has that digital transformation occurred? Is it more advanced in specific industries, or is it generally still at the early stages? Pretty much
I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, first I should say, you know, in any conversation like this in which we're going to speak of Africa, that Africa was not one place, right?
Thank you.
I've sometimes said there's 54 or 55 countries, depending on who's asking. There's so many countries. There's so many countries we can't keep track.
Yeah.
But I do dare to speak of Africa as a whole, but a differentiated whole. That's how I often think of it. But let's take it with that caveat, and speak of Africa writ large. No, I mean there's enormous space available, much more space yet to be built out than has been built into date, and the numbers alone show that, right? So there's about 500 million Africans with access to the internet at this time, and there's about 700 million that are yet to adopt the internet. So just that number, I mean, that's a facile number for talking about whether there's more or less opportunity, but you know, it gives you some quantum of how much more there is to do. And then of course you get into like how much people are purchasing online relative to their income, which is very low. How much? I mean, we are mostly in productivity, so a lot of our work is B2B. How many business processes are still you know, at best on an Excel spreadsheet, but more often on pen and paper. So there's still an enormous opportunity for value creation just by moving things from analog to digital.
Yeah, I'd like
there will be for a long time.
Yes, totally agree. I'd like to ask a question about Africa Innovation Partners, if I may. So AIP, after you left Dalberg, you set up AIP with Mitchell Alego, like you mentioned, and you said, I'd like to know, for the viewers listening, what kind of what investment stage do you normally invest in? And of course, a follow-up question then would be, what is the typical size of investment? And forgive me, a third question, what is the size of the fund for AIP?
Sure. So AIP is a private investment partnership, and we have 4 participants at its core. Myself, managing partner, Mitchell, Tom Gibeon, who was the co-founder of Emerging Capital Partners and the first MD there, and Neil Hanch, who was the original managing director of Mest and is now the CEO of Silicon Foundry in San Francisco. And we invest typically in companies who already, I'm going to describe it not by series, but by characteristic of the company, okay, because series means something quite different.
There's a big blur these days.
Yes, yeah, in different geographies. So in companies that, we look for companies that typically already have a strong product market fit, they're demonstrating exceptional growth, and they are either already cross-boundary or on the cusp of going cross-boundary. Those are the kinds of companies we're looking for. We are sector neutral, but tend to focus on productivity enhancing software. So we generally have preference for software over physical assets, but there's often a mix in the company, but that's where our first focus is. And on productivity, which generally leads us to B2B, business to business, or B2B2C, business to consumer companies. We look at some consumer companies, some direct to consumer companies, but in general, it's we believe the greatest opportunity lies in the ability to enhance productivity, and so we're looking with that lens. There are a number of other, filters that we look for. I mentioned that one are entrepreneurs who have gotten knocked down and gotten back up. That's a big priority for us. We have some sectors where we see particular promise, identity, logistics. We think that these are, two big growth areas that will follow where a lot of the money is gone, which is, fintech and payments. That's the range. Those are some of the sectors we look at. But I want to be clear that we're sector neutral.
Okay. And what's the typical size of check that you would write?
Yeah, so I think we go a wide range on that, from several $100,000 to several million, single-digit million US. We look to have a material interest in the company. We look to be active in the company, that doesn't necessarily mean a board seat, but it can. But what we're most looking for is an active engagement with management, and an active, communication, certainly information.
So that, if I can deduce from that you would typically invest anything from $200,000 to give or take $8 million. Would that be a fair assumption?
So I think I said it the way I would say it, which is several $100,000 to several million.
Okay, well noted. And generally speaking, typically most VCs have a specific fund size, and then they take from that pool of funds, or they're constantly they constantly have a pool that is being replenished on a regular basis. How does AIP work?
So AIP to date, AIP was formed just in the last 18 months or so, and I began looking at investments. And actually, we started making our first investments as AIP. We each had individual investments, but we first started making our investments at the beginning of this year. And those are out of, so we each initiated with our own personal capital. That was our first transaction with outside funds, and it went well. We're happy with that, and we are likely to do a couple more transactions and then raise the first fund.
I see. Okay. Is there? This company you just mentioned, is it one you can disclose publicly, or is there a particular investment you have made that you can actually talk about or disclose?
Sure, I don't mind disclosing that. So we invested in, our first investment was in Migo Money, which is a San Francisco-based company founded with a Nigerian founder that initiated its first market is Nigeria. Yeah. And it's a company that primarily brings working capital to small businesses and enables large companies to provide those kind of customers with instant credit. So this is a way in which small business uses Visa here in the U.S. is a way in which they would use Migo in Nigeria and shortly in Brazil.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm also aware that Migo is opening up in Brazil as well. So yes. Okay, thanks for that. This section that we would go to now is what we call rapid fire. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you a few random questions, like I said earlier. And so you could just fire back.
Can we go back for a moment? I would say just a little bit about why Migo was why we thought it was a great choice. It might enlighten some of your viewers about why we liked it. So first and foremost is the founding team. We had a lot of confidence in Akechi and his team. They had done a lot of hard work looking at the market. They were bringing a product that was growing that was unique in its marketplace. It was embedded in the market so that their product, unlike some of its competitors, doesn't come over the top and lend at the expense of local banks and local merchants. It works with those banks and those merchants, and we thought that that's a much more sustainable model on a number of fronts. So we were quite attracted to that. and then that they had that they had real local market knowledge. It was very powerful in Nigeria, but also a strong global perspective. It mattered to us that they were planning international and even growth outside of Africa at the time that we engaged with them. So all of that plus a lot of fundamental quantitative analysis led us to conclude this is a good company for us to come in with. Also, our team knew them. Our people. We because of who we have at AIP, we were able to get several multiple data points, multiple relationships around the Migo team that gave us deeper and deeper confidence that this was a good company to be growing with.
Interesting. Okay. For just a follow-up question on Migo as well. So Migo has set up in Nigeria. I think one of the things that, to my knowledge, that they've been able to do well has been in terms of data gathering and the channels that they've actually used to get the data, which sounds like something very interesting. And in Brazil as well. So do you know if there are other plans in terms of expansion to other parts of Africa in particular?
Yeah. I have had discussions about that with management. Because I'm not sure if those are public. I probably should not discuss that. I should let them discuss it.
Okay, sounds good. So we look forward to hearing from Migo and the opportunities available from Migo. Great. So Jonathan, I think, like I said, this is now a little bit of the fun part where we go into our rapid fire section, and you're safe. And so just a few random questions and what have you. What's your favorite sport?
My favorite sport is really being in the. So I love a lot of sports. I practice Aikido when I'm in the city, which is a Japanese martial art. It teaches me almost nothing about how to defend myself physically, but a tremendous amount about how to blend with life around me. I highly recommend taking a couple Aikido classes for anybody.
Okay.
And then when I'm in the woods, which is often, I'm often hiking in the woods. That's another great passion.
Okay. What's the most shocking memory you had when you were in Africa? And I say Africa differentiated.
Yeah. Right. Well, I don't want to feed into any adverse narratives that occupy people.
Okay, what's your fondest memory then? What's your fondest memory?
Yeah, shocking. When I listen, I have shocking memories walking down some of the streets of the Bronx too. But pleasant memories are so vast. So one of the benefits of having worked in the extractive sector is that you get to be in some very remote places that other people don't get to, because you go where, as they say, where God put the rock. And so a couple years ago, I was in the DRC, in a pretty remote part of the eastern DRC, and to get out to parts that were really underdeveloped, and still see that there were young children there with hope, with hope, getting education. Some of it, just like I say, very basic and analog, but getting a strong education, but then also having the beginnings of access to the world. I mean, I know that this is, that we have a long way to go. But that the kids in that village were able to get even some preliminary math education over their feature phone, which all of them had access to, even in the smallest village. That was pretty moving to me, and it's one thing to hear about that level of access, but it's another thing to be out there for an extended period and working with communities and see it.
What do you miss the most that you think you would normally have been doing, but during this COVID times, what do you miss the most not being able to do?
Oh my gosh. It's embracing people. And I know this because we recently spent a little bit of time with our closest friends who we haven't seen in 7 months, and we agreed to go into pod together, right? We went to quarantine and got together, and I embraced my friend, which is just my habit, and I couldn't let go. Just human contact, even physical contact like that, is something I miss a great deal.
Yeah, that embrace generally is very. I did not know this, but I have been told. I don't know if this is true. That is actually a very African thing. The embrace. So typically, I've been told again, many just shake hands or just things like that. But it's usually the Africans who go all in and embrace. So we're probably making an African of you already.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I grew up with a lot of hugging, right? A lot of physical affection. So maybe that's what drew me there in the first place, right? Yeah, but it must be hard for you then. I mean, to not to have to abandon that for this long period.
Yes, it's tough, and I try to make sure that I visit home as regularly as possible. So, Jonathan, I guess maybe as we wind down now, what advice do you have? Well, twofold. First of all, for GFA, because we always want to get feedback to be better. We're relatively new and trying to help develop entrepreneurs that can solve the problems on the continent. What advice do you have for us at Get Funded Africa? And secondly, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who have this dream and probably could be funded by venture capital to accelerate their dreams?
Yeah. So for GFA, and you and I have discussed this a little bit privately. It's very. I think it's critical. I think many of the things you're doing for the entrepreneurs are spot on in terms of helping them bridge the gap to investors, coming to understand investors, myself and others, and allowing for the communication to be, for communication friction to drop, right? I think that's highly valuable. In terms of sort of service, to the extent that there's service provision to VCs, I think it's important to ensure that you're filling a niche that they need. So the question you asked me, what do you need that you don't have? I mean, that's a conversation we've had public here and then also privately. Yeah. I would continue to ask that question, and don't assume that the answer that was true in August 2020 is true in August 2021. It won't be, right? There will be that need will shift. And so being dynamic in understanding what the need of the community is would be a principal guidance to you. And I would say that Invest Africa, where I'm active, has been quite good in things like that. AVCA, the African Venture Capital Association, I think also been quite good at listening to its community and tracking with the change of need. So that's what I'd say for GFA. For entrepreneurs, listen, the things you're offering strike me as a very good idea for them. So I mean, listen, fundamentally where I'd start is people will tell you that it won't be possible. Count on it, and then ignore it. No one I know who has started something, and I've started a couple companies and been quite active in the early stages of another. All of them were told, you can't do it, won't be possible, and told that repeatedly, much more than they were told that it would be possible. So count on that as part of the process to actually making it possible, right? That's the first thing. And the second is to listen. I believe in bringing the right research and the right being ready for your presentation, being ready for your discussions with VCs, having the facts at your command, try to marshal the facts. But once you've got those facts marshaled, stand your ground. Stand your ground. Don't let other people dissuade you. If your facts are right, your will and your position should prevail. That would be my perspective. Work hard to get a fact-based argument and then stand on it.
Once again, thank you so much, Jonathan, for your time. Thank you for being there and for the lovely conversation that we've had. We look forward to having you on more and more episodes of GFA and working with you with entrepreneurs as well in terms of financing and things like that. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Glad to do it. I admire what you're doing with GFA.
And on this note, we've come to the end of this episode of GFA-Attract. If you aren't, please follow us on our YouTube page, Get Funded Africa, and also on LinkedIn, Get Funded Africa. Thank you once again. Have a very, very good day. Bye-bye for now.